The Großdeutschland Panzer Division was the German Army's premier armored formation. Staffed exclusively by volunteers and attracting the cream of Germany's young officers, it quickly established a reputation for excellence on the battlefield. But such elite status meant it was thrown into desperate battles against the Red Army on the Eastern Front, which gradually exhausted its reserves of tanks, armored personnel carriers, and men. After Hitler launched his armies at the Soviet Union in June 1941, he increasingly called on so-called fire brigade units to spearhead vital attacks or plug gaps in the line after overwhelming Soviet attacks had shattered the German front after 1943. While the panzer divisions of the Waffen-SS are most commonly thought of as the Führer's fire brigade, the German army also created its own elite armored force. Originally only a motorized infantry regiment, Großdeutschland grew in the space of 6 years into a Panzergrenadier Division and then into a huge armored corps, nominally containing 4 divisions and 2 brigades. The Großdeutschland Panzer Corps was destined never to fight together, and many of its units existed only on paper. The very name Großdeutschland, or Greater Germany, summed up the ethos of the unit. It was no ordinary line unit but the German Army's premier fighting force, containing its most experienced and professional officers and soldiers. It became a matter of pride that the German Army could field elite units to rival the panzer divisions of the Waffen-SS. The name betrayed the ideological underpinning of the unit. Its sole purpose was to lead and win Hitler's war of aggression, first in Western Europe and then Russia. Großdeutschland was Hitler's ambition to create a German state that dominated continental Europe. Those nations or races that had no place in the Führer's plans were to be expelled or exterminated. By naming its elite unit after Hitler's maniac scheme, the German Army High Command clearly demonstrated that it had signed up to their Führer's crazed plans to create a master race. Except for a few small elements, from 1941 onwards Großdeutschland units fought almost exclusively on the Eastern Front against the Red Army. In January 1943, Großdeutschland was ordered to be pulled out of the line and moved south to join a major offensive to relieve the 6th Army. By the time the division made it to its assembly area near Kharkov, it was joined by the remainder of the newly formed Panzer Regiment Großdeutschland, which boasted a full battalion of 42 Panzer IVs and a company of 9 new Tiger I heavy tanks. These 58-ton monster tanks were armed with the deadly 88mm cannon that could destroy AT-34 at 2,000 m. Almost as important, the new arrivals were led by the regiment's commander, Colonel Count Hyacinth von Strachwitz, who was soon to become famous as the Panzer Count. He was already a hero from World War I, when he had led a German raiding party into Paris. The division had only just escaped from encirclement in Kharkov, when the newly reinforced Panzer Regiment was ordered to lead a major German counterattack to turn back the Soviet winter offensive. Von Strachwitz led his panzers forward with considerable dash during March 1943, pushing forward at a great pace until it was engaged by the Soviet 2nd Tank Corps. In the first clash of a bloody week, 46 T-34s were knocked out by the Großdeutschland's Panzer Regiment. The German offensive now started to gain momentum, with village after village falling to von Strachwitz's panzers. The following day they ran into a network of Soviet anti-tank guns, called a pack front by the Germans, and prepared positions and backed by a large number of infantry bunkers. The panzers came into their own, standing off and systematically blasting the anti-tank guns out of their bunkers. Flamethrower tanks then finished off the position. As the attack rolled forward, on March 16th another 30 T-34s were destroyed by the panzers when they surprised a Soviet tank brigade in its assembly area. More Soviet tanks were thrown into the battle 2 days later, but von Strachwitz heard the tanks coming and quickly deployed his panzers to surprise the advancing Soviets. The panzers were driven into peasant huts to hide them, and von Strachwitz ordered his gunners to hold their fire. Soviet tanks cautiously edged forward until they were actually inside the village. With nerves of steel, the Panzer crews held fire for several hours. When the Soviet tanks exposed their side armor to the Germans, von Strachwitz fired his 88mm cannon, which took the turret off a T-34 with ease. This was a signal for the rest of the regiment to open up. In a few seconds, 18 T-34s were in flames. It was then that the Germans moved forward to attack. By the end of the day, 90 Soviet tanks had been destroyed. Soviet attacks continued for more than a week as several infantry divisions and tank brigades were thrown at the Großdeutschland lines.
Die überlebenden Sowjets werden zurückgebracht.
All these efforts were rebuffed with heavy losses among the attackers. At the end of March, Colonel General Heinz Guderian, the Inspector General of the Panzer troops, came to view the Großdeutschland's handiwork. With pride, von Strachwitz was able to show the father of the German panzers a tank graveyard north of Kharkov containing hundreds of smashed Soviet T-34s. As heavy rains turned Russia into a mud bath, both the Germans and Soviets turned their attention to reorganizing and refitting their forces for the coming summer campaign season. The Army High Command was determined that Großdeutschland would have the honor of spearheading Operation Citadel to cut off the Soviet defenders holding the Kursk salient, which jetted more than 80 kilometers into the German front. It became fashionable among aristocratic, middle-ranking officers to join the Großdeutschland as a way to gain battle experience, medals, and promotion. It was also seen as important to ensure the German army was not totally eclipsed by the Waffen-SS.